Hey Micky, welcome back to the podcast. How are you doing?
Oh, mate, it's a pleasure. Always a pleasure. I love talking to you, Joff. I'm doing really well over in Australia. I hope you're doing well too, brother.
Yeah, well, you're wearing a jumper there, so you're obviously freezing, and it's absolutely roasting here because it's the middle of summer. So we've got those differences going on.
100%, mate. Yeah, no, I'm actually pretty cold. Sat in my little office at the moment, which is a rarity being in Australia.
Yeah. All right. So Mick's been on the podcast before. Mick actually does some work with me as well. We work closely with some members on Mick. I send to people to Micky for actually even more in-depth stalking of food and stalking of workouts, and just to kind of get to that next level of fat loss. Micky's obviously had a very successful journey himself with the stuff that he's done, with the stuff that he's implementing with his clients. Very knowledgeable, but is also able to apply it as well. So I wanted Micky to come back onto the show. I'm not going to make him introduce himself because he's already been on the show, and I'll direct you where you can listen to his original one. But today we wanted to focus and talk about metabolism and just kind of give it some context about how it might affect you in terms of if you have got a weight loss or a fat loss goal that you're working towards now. Quite often that we see, and I'm sure Micky will agree with this, we see people tend to float towards blaming things like metabolism for not making progress or perhaps putting on weight without actually addressing some of the other factors before. So we wanted to give some context about why metabolism might be a factor, and then other ways around that as well. Does that sound about right, Mick?
Yeah, that sounds perfect, Joff. I can't wait to get stuck into this one with you.
Okay, so nice, easy start then. Let's, take it right back to basics. We want this to be, we want people to be able to understand this from, everyday person going to the gym. We don't want it to be too in depth, but what is metabolism?
Yeah, so it's always the golden question, isn't it? So basically, what metabolism is the sum total of everything that goes on in the body. So we look at the TDEE, which is the total daily energy expenditure. So one of the best ways that you can describe metabolism really is the process by which the body converts what you eat and you drink into energy. And during this biochemical process, calories in your food and beverages are combined with oxygen to release the energy into your body that it needs to function. So it's pretty much, as I stated before, it's the sum total of everything that goes on in the body, which is the total daily energy expenditure.
Yeah, so people always, when you have this conversation with people and you see it branded all over the internet, the latest fat loss supplements, the latest training regime is boost your metabolism, intermittent fasting will talk about like resetting your metabolism. I think from the outset, I think it's really important that we note that we know this in the health and fitness industry. Marketing is a massive part of it to make money for, businesses to make money, which for all intents and purposes, like that's what people are there to do. They're there to generate money, generate business for themselves. But metabolism seems to be one of those words that people never fully understand. And it's always easy to kind of manipulate and add buzzwords around the metabolism.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. There's so many myths in the industry as well. This person's got a fast metabolism, this person's got a slow metabolism. As you said before, like this, it's so easy to blame metabolism, but I fear that a lot of people generally don't really understand what metabolism is. They just see it as a scapegoat as such. I just blame my metabolism. That's why I didn't lose weight because I got a slow one, or that person's got a fast one. They can eat more. It's not fair. But we're going to dive into a little bit more of the science behind metabolism and how it can be affected. Things such as adaptations and what basically makes up the metabolism.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And I really feel like these myths do actually come from like a particular place. Like, yes, is a fact that someone can have a slower metabolism or a faster metabolism, but there's no thought process into why that might happen. And I guess that's what we're going to go into today. Before we dive deeper into it, you mentioned a couple of things there, obviously, about your total daily energy expenditure. One of the things is your metabolism or your BMR. What are the other things that go into expending energy? So I think people know and have had it drilled into them enough over the last 3 or 4 years, which is actually great. Creating a calorie deficit to lose weight, consuming less calories, burning more calories, that type of stuff. How do we actually burn more calories above just what our basal metabolic rate is?
Yeah, so if we were going to look at this from a pie chart perspective, we'd have about 75% of your TDEE, which is your total daily energy expenditure. 75% of this is going to come from like your BMR. So that's your bodily functions, pretty much like keeping us alive, everything that keeps us alive, our skin growing, our heart beating, etc. About 15% of this is going to come from physical activity. So this can be things including NEAT as well. So obviously when you go to the gym as well and you're doing your rowing or you're doing your HIIT sessions, your CrossFit or your resistance training, this is going to come under that 15%. And then we've got about 10% left that comes from the thermic effect of feeding. So basically the food that we eat and then how the body breaks down this food. It requires energy and calories to break down food as well. So that's where the other 10% come from. In highly active people, the BMR can be around 60%, and then you're going to get about 30% of physical activity and things like your NEAT will come in there. But the 10% of thermic effect of feeding is always going to stay around the same.
Yeah, you mentioned NEAT there, and I think just to go over that again, that's your non-exercise activity, and that is literally just getting more steps in. I know that's one of the things that you do a lot with the people that come on your program. Yes, you send them programs to do in the gym, all the fancy exercises, deadlifting, squatting, that type of stuff. But a lot of what you do is just, hey, I want you to actually increase your steps for the day, right?
Yeah. Walking's like one of the easiest ways that we can increase NEAT, and it's a very good variable to have control over as well. So if we're putting on a client under a certain steps regime, if I'm telling you, Joff, to walk 10,000 steps, you either did or you didn't. It's a very easy variable to control and analyze. But other things can come under NEAT, like simple things of like fidgeting, or taking a phone call. Those people that take a phone call and then they just disappear for like half an hour and they're walking up and down the stairs around the rooms, like that all equates to your NEAT. And people that fidget, I find in general, like I talk a lot with my hands, and I find in general I do that when I've probably eaten more food. If I've got more food available, I'm much more active in my appearance. Whereas if I go into like a calorie deficit, and I talk about how I was prepping for stage that time when I was going into that bodybuilding, the last couple of weeks, like my body was doing everything it can to prevent me from burning those extra calories. So my fidgeting, I was PTing, I was a lazy PT, I was leaning up against machines. I actually apologized to my clients, saying like, this is my body almost trying to take over and prevent me from burning those extra calories. But I was getting to the point where I was actually thinking, oh my God, I'm actually leaning against this machine. Like, how pathetic. But it was literally just a defense mechanism of my body to try and slow me down. So, when we talk about like fast and slow metabolism, people, what normally gets missed is the effect of NEAT in these people. I know for a fact that I know people that previously, before I knew too much about metabolism and stuff, and I would throw around these blames or different things. I know that I've got some mates that seem like they can eat a lot and they never got fat. And I was like, what the hell? Like, I look at a packet of Doritos, I put on like 10 pounds. But looking at it from the bigger picture now, I also look back on those people and I'm like, man, these people moved. Like, even if we're just playing FIFA, sat on the sofa, like their legs are twitching, they're jumping up and down, like simple things or like that I wasn't necessarily aware of. I just thought, oh, they've got a faster metabolism. But in general, like normally the rule of thumb, like if someone's accusing or being accused of having a fast metabolism, it generally means that they're probably moving a lot more than you actually are aware of, and their NEAT is a lot higher than you are actually aware of as well.
Yeah, that's super interesting. That's some great points to bring up there. And I like what you said about steps being an easy variable to control, like as a coach as well, because most people have activity trackers these days. They have step counters in their phone, they have step counters on their watches. And it's like you said, you've either done it or you haven't. And I bet if people were to look back over, a month, 2 months, and the person who was saying, I've got a fast metabolism, will probably look back and go, yeah, look, I'm doing 12,000 steps a day. Like my job is this, I'm a teacher walking up and down stairs all the time, versus the person who's saying they've got a slower metabolism. And you might look at their data, and this is actual data they've collected, and they're only doing 4,000 or 5,000 steps a day, or, there's just not as much activity. And that's just an easy representation to at least look at the starting points of where metabolism might be affected, or your TDEE that you mentioned before. Yeah, let's get into more detail then with the factors that impact metabolism. So we're not talking necessarily about the total daily energy expenditure. We're moving away from the non-exercise activity, and the effective food and exercise. What factors do affect metabolism?
So one of the biggest things that we've got to look at is when we lose weight, your body actually becomes more efficient, you know. And some people throw around the terms of damaged metabolism, or you've ruined your metabolism, but all it is really is it's metabolic adaptation. It's an adaptation period that your body will go through. And John Berardi, who's a great guy in this industry, I think he's the owner and creator of Precision Nutrition. He talks about someone he knows who actually he used a weight belt on their clients to give them to give the body the same signals that they're still carrying excess weight. Because when you lose weight, you obviously become a smaller person. You know, your general mass has shrunk. You know, you've become a smaller person. So everything that you do requires less calories than it did when you were a larger person. So he was talking about how I think it's one of his friends uses weight belts on their clients to give them the body the same signals that they're still carrying that excess weight, and therefore that you wouldn't necessarily to be so aggressive in dropping calories or as aggressively making your client do more of an output, whereas you just increase the weight belt. So every time you lose weight, you just effectively adding weight to that person. So the body still thinks it's carrying that excess weight. And, you know, I'm not saying that everyone should buy weight belts for sure, but it's a tool that's being used in the industry, which I wasn't actually aware of this until a few weeks ago, until I was researching a little bit about insulin metabolism. I find that a fantastic tool to use, you know, because sometimes coaches out there can be too aggressive at cutting calories, because when your body starts to lose weight, and we just discussed then that you become a smaller person, at some point you probably will hit a plateau, and that is the body again adapting to the new calories that you're on. So you may no longer be in a calorie deficit. So if you've got a smaller person now, say this person started off at 200 pounds and they're down to 150 pounds, and you haven't changed anything apart from you know, maybe a little bit of their steps or something, that calorie deficit that you calculated for them when they were 200 pounds is no longer necessarily a calorie deficit of this person at 150 pounds. So people again will then put the blame on, oh, it's because my metabolism's damaged, and it's not that. It's just your body has literally adapted to whatever you're doing there and then. At 150 pounds, your body's no longer willing to shift any more weight, because it's fearing that you're almost trying to starve it or trying to kill it. So, you know, the body in general wants to make life less costly. So if we look at this as an example, if you ran 1 mile for the first time, you're going to be so inefficient at that mile. You're going to be a little bit heavier. You're probably going to have like poor technique. You're going to have poor enzymatic systems. This will account to a high amount of burning calories. So this is, you actually want your body to be more inefficient than efficient. So if you continue to do this over time, your body becomes efficient, which in weight loss is actually a bad thing, you know, because you're in general, you're going to improve your technique. You're going to be a little bit lighter, and your body will find ways to make this 1 mile easier. So if you want to get ahead of the 8 ball in a circumstance like this, you'd have to make that new mile, or that new output, as intense as it was that first time. You know, so you're gonna have to run it faster, or you're gonna have to run for longer. Otherwise, the body is just gonna become too efficient.
Yeah, mate, that's some really good points there. And I think someone just listening to this now, just to make the point, and obviously we work with clients on a daily basis and watch them through their journeys from perhaps when they've got maybe a lot of weight to lose, or to when they've only got like a little bit of fat that they want to lose. They want to get into like the lower percentages. And I think what you've just kind of summed up there is that it never gets any easier, actually. There's always manipulation. There's always things that you have to do. And quite often what you'll find is that people at the beginning of their fat loss or weight loss journey will see some pretty immediate effects, because they've made some big lifestyle changes. They're doing all the basic things, and all of the things that you've just summed up there, they've got that going in their favor. The things that it is actually harder, they have more weight, that type of stuff. But then when you get to that last kind of, right, I want to lose 2 or 3%, and I'm sure you were there when you were just about to get on stage, and like how detailed and how granular you have to get with everything that you're doing, from logging your food, from doing extra steps, from the type of training that you're doing. And you even mentioned fidgeting, that type of stuff.
Yeah, no, it's honestly like to kind of like, you know, if we're going to talk to those extremes, I've got a guy now who's 5 weeks away from competing in his first ever bodybuilding show. And so, again, like talking about the steps and like how do we stay ahead of the eight ball, like bearing in mind these strategies that we're just about to talk about are not their long-term solutions. You know, like this guy is looking to go on stage, he needs to be as lean as possible. These aren't going to be sustainable long-term futuristic plans. But for example, this week he's doing 5 workout resistance training workouts. He's got 50 minutes of cardio, and he's doing 15,000 steps a day. You know, you're not going to do that for the rest of your life. Like your body will literally shut down. But these are some of the things that we have to make sure, because he's in such a lean condition at the moment. His body is waiting for an excuse to stop burning any more fat effectively, because, you know, if we cut to the chase, his body generally at the moment thinks that it's about to die. Like it's starving. You know, it's not used to this excessive exercise or reduction in calories. So there is going to be points where you have to push yourself to the extremes if you wanted to look amazing for a photo shoot or a bodybuilding competition. You know, but then it's also your recovery out of this has to be on point as well. But you know, that was just talking about some extreme cases. But there's another thing that when I was looking at a little bit of the research before I jumped on this podcast with you, J-Man, was I found out about this new thrifty and spend-thrifty metabolism. And this was just like, what? But it's actually quite simple to understand. So again, John Berardi cites what I'm about to talk about on a podcast, The Art of Manliness, in episode 552, is where they took and overfed a big group of individuals by about 1,000 calories above maintenance. That's a pretty aggressive surplus. And by the end of the study, some gained no weight at all, and some gained around 35 pounds. You know, to the standard listener of maybe like this podcast, and you know, this would be to you and me maybe 5 years ago. How does that make sense? How did some people not gain weight on 1,000 calories a day? But they literally concluded that it was a type of metabolism called the spend-thrift, which is where these people who didn't gain weight found more ways to burn calories during the day. And most of this came from the NEAT, which we were talking about earlier. And they basically found a way to up-regulate. You know, some people, you know, this can actually, I think some of the studies suggested that this can potentially sometimes come from genetics as well. So genetically, we might be one of those people that generally move more. And the people that didn't, the people that did gain weight, these were 50 people, and they didn't upregulate at all. They literally just gained everything because they weren't moving around anymore. That they were just there sedentary, just eating this food and gaining weight. It's pretty crazy.
Wow, that's super interesting. I'm definitely going to check that one out as well. Let's pull it back a little bit from there, and let's go, because I don't want, like, we want to look at all angles of like metabolism as well, and factors that do impact metabolism. I think let's just start really obvious. Like, age is one, your height is one, weight is one, the sex you are is one. Obviously, the difference in numbers and what that your BMR will kind of burn. Age is a really interesting one, and I actually got this. I've got the Precision Nutrition book here from John Brady, and he talks about. I mean, don't quote me on this, but I remember reading, and it was fascinating about just age, that your metabolism from the age of like 25 to 45 could potentially drop by 150 or 200 calories. So that whole thought process behind someone going, oh, I'm putting on weight and it's because of my age. Like, there is some relevance to that. And you think about what 200 calories is in your daily food intake. That's the difference between eating, like, you know, a snack or, you know, a Mars bar, or, you know, having 2 extra drinks on the weekend. Like, that's the difference right there. And if someone's not taking that into consideration, then they're already not really knowing where they're at with that. But what other factors are there that you know of?
But just to add on what you just said then as well, you know, again, it's like yes, 100%. There is some truth behind that age thing, but again, I feel that there's people out there that are quick to blame the age. Oh, I'm past 40, I'm past 50 now. I've got no chance. And I hear that a lot. I actually train quite a few middle-aged men, and they come to me and go, I thought this was my last ever hope. It's now or never. And it's like, you, it's not like that. It doesn't have to be like that. In general, I was thinking about this earlier on, right? Like, in general, right, this is a very generalized comment. I would say as we get older, you know, maybe past the kind of 40s and 50s, we generally tend to get a little bit smaller and less efficient, and we probably move less as well. If we look at our grandparents, for example, God bless them, mine have both passed away, but I remember they were like 95, both of them, and they were so small, so frail, like zero muscle mass, and just these small frames of people, and their metabolism would have been, if you compare to them at 95 compared to when they were 25, man, we were probably looking at like 1,000, 1,500 calories difference. So like, yes, over age in general, your metabolism does start to slow down. You become a little bit more efficient, but again, on the bigger picture, it's because unfortunately we normally shrink. 95% of us, as we get older, we actually tend to get a little bit smaller and shorter, so your body then doesn't require as many calories to keep that metabolism alive and afloat, because you are, in general, you're a smaller mass of a person as well. So I think that's a big thing that goes without saying as well. People generally forget that we do get smaller, and a smaller person will have a smaller or lesser metabolism than a larger person.
Yeah, and that's a good point that you brought up there, actually. And I guess that's where lifestyle factors comes in before. I always think about metabolism and hormonal imbalances and those types of things. That they are real. I'm not trying to say, hey, you're not moving enough, you're not doing enough exercise. Like, there is people who suffer with them. But as we've already mentioned, I feel too many people are quick to say, but I'm not going to adjust any of my lifestyle factors. I'm not going to take responsibility and, understand that I probably don't move enough, and I probably don't exercise enough, and I probably don't watch what I'm eating enough. Hey, let's just go down to, I've got some hormonal imbalances. I've got some metabolism issues, that type of stuff. You mentioned before our call, actually, that you were going to talk about like just the basics of having more muscle. I know you kind of referenced then about getting smaller as you get older. What is the variability of just simply having more muscle?
But in general, the more muscle you have, effectively, you turn into like a fat burning machine. So like, having more muscle mass and keeping that active as well, not just having it, but keeping it active. So this is important, that you have to do some kind of resistance weight training as well. It generally requires more energy. The more muscle that you have, it requires more energy to stay as it is. It's not so energy consuming for a body to sit and kind of store its fat. Whereas if you've got muscles that are active and big and large, they need feeding. So in general, like, if you've got more muscle, you're generally going to have a larger mass, and therefore your metabolism is going to be a little bit more efficient. You're going to be burning those calories a little bit faster and more efficient as well.
And that's why, as trainers, and I'm always talking about the benefits of strength training, that is probably one of the biggest reasons that we implement strength training, because building more muscle is going to make you more efficient for your daily life. And a lot of people that I work with are just people, they're not trying to get to, competitions and things like that, but they just want to stay in good shape. They want to build some muscle. They want to look good. And that's one of the easiest things, right? Rather than just going and doing 5 HIIT cardio sessions a week, where there might be an element of strength to it, but not in terms of like progressively overloading strength. 5 circuit classes a week, you're not going to be building much muscle there. So you're essentially just going in and just trading off food for calories each time that you're going in, right? Whereas if you're going in and doing a strength training session, you're getting the calories, the bang for the buck that you've got there, and you're getting the added bonus, I guess, of building muscle that's going to help in your daily calories.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. And what you just said then as well, like talking about how you can just maybe go in and do like these 5 classes, and there's also what we talk about is having like metabolic flexibility and maybe being metabolic inflexible. So when we train our bodies to always use the fuel that we give it each day, it finds it hard to use things like the stored fat. So I remember the days when people used to say, oh, you want to eat like 6 or 8 or 10 times a day to boost metabolism. Like, if if anything, that's like completely incorrect, because if you're constantly feeding the body's always going to use the fuel that you're feeding it to burn. So sometimes this is where I've actually started to become a little bit more of a fan of a little bit of intermittent fasting, can sometimes be beneficial. I'm not saying that everyone should do this. However, if you can train the body to become more flexible, some days, this doesn't have to be a starvation. You don't have to starve yourself for the day, but you might do something like a 16-8, or even up to a 20 and a 4. Whereas if you basically let your body become more adaptive at taking fuel away from the body, such as stored energy, you can almost flip between. Sometimes when you might have had clients where, I didn't have breakfast and I went all lightheaded, I was all over the place. It's because the body was like, what the hell's going on? Like, normally you give me food, I've got plenty of fat stored in my body, but I don't know how to access that because I'm always so readily available with the food that you give me. Now that suddenly doesn't come in, I throw a wobbly and I'm all over the place, and my blood hormones are going all over the place, and I don't know what's going on. This is where someone could be like metabolic inflexible. Whereas if you potentially can maybe put a little bit of intermittent fasting into your day, you're actually giving the body the opportunity and the chance to start using stored fat as energy as well, which that in turn that can be very beneficial too. Again, I'd like to put quote unquote and make this a big open bracket: calories in and out, calories in and versus calories out is always going to be like the determining factor whether or not you're actually going to lose the weight. You can't intermittent fast and then eat like an absolute pig. Like, it doesn't really work like that. But there are some benefits that can actually help from intermittent fasting to help you tap into stored fat stores.
Yeah, that's good that you gave it the preface as well before. Like, I think it's always just super handy to just remind people, like, yes, we're getting into more detail and you're listening to this, but it does come back down to what we preach about anyway. I know that you've done a lot of work with one of the ladies that we both know recently, and up to you how much detail we go into in terms of, listen, we're not doctors, we're not clinical dietitians or anything like that, but the role of like hormones, because we are talking metabolism, there is going to be a factor there as well. How, what certain things do you find with hormones in terms of helping people to manage their metabolism? And I guess I'm kind of gearing more towards people that have potentially gone through stages of yo-yo dieting and restrictive eating and, basically starving themselves, that type of stuff. Do you find there's a big kind of, does it mess with hormones, I guess I'm trying to say?
I thoroughly believe it would do, yeah, because I think one of the most common things we see in yo-yo dieting is people sitting in such a low calorie deficit for so long to try and force this fat off them. And once you're on a deficit for so long, you can actually run into hormonal dysfunctions. This can be a very inactive or underperforming thyroid. It could be things like testosterone, estrogen levels can be completely out of whack. So 100%, like if people sit in deficits for too long trying to force this fat off, you can run into potential issues. And then again, one of the issues is, if you're trying to reverse diet this person out, they might, and you're trying to increase calories a little bit because, if you've got no room to move, you can't take calories away any more than if they're already eating 800 calories. You can't keep them taken away because you're going to kill them and die. So like you go for a strategy or process called reverse dieting, but if they've had such damage, hormonal kind of enzymatic reactions from being in the deficit so long, then this could potentially put them out of whack completely on the other way as well, because you can start reverse dieting them, giving them more calories, and their weight can shoot up as well because they've got a very underperforming thyroid, for example. So yeah, like hormones can 100% have implications to your metabolic rate. So it's always best to get blood work checked. I like to do that like once a year. And you get your car service once or twice a year, so it's good to get your body service too. And just make sure that everything's in good working order.
Yeah, that's great. And like, I guess that comes back down to what we do as coaches. We're constantly monitoring people and looking at the data that's given. And I guess we're only in a position that we can, as long as people are following our instructions and we can get that adherence from them, that's where we can potentially help.
Yeah, 100%, mate. 100%.
Okay, mate. Right. Let's, I think we've got through that quite nicely. Let's wrap it up there. Mick, I'm definitely going to get you on again because I always feel like the information that you give out is always super valuable. And something that's like metabolism, it's good to get your input on there.
I appreciate that so much, man. As I said, it's always a pleasure joining you on here. We go back a long way, so no, it's great to chat to you.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks again, Mick.
No, pleasure, Joff. Cheers, mate.